I'm going to start with just a couple questions.
Okay.
You were a musician
Yep.
in Hawaii, and then a camera showed up, and what happened?
I was a folk musician.
Right.
Played in a coffee house called the Greensleeves Coffee House in Honolulu, where I was studying psychology at the University of Hawaii. And then we came to LA to seek our fortunes, and we played college concerts and TV shows for 4 or 5 years. One day, on our last tour, we went in a secondhand shop, and there was a bunch of secondhand cameras. And one guy in the group said, "Hey, a camera, I'm gonna get one." And I said, "Yeah, why not, I'll get one." Total accident. We started taking pictures of each other on the tour, and when we got home to LA, developed the film, and it was transparencies. I had no idea what it was gonna be. There were slides. I said, "Let's have a slideshow." And when that first picture hit the wall, I couldn't believe it. It was magic. There were those famous moments that we shared, huge on the wall. And I just said, "Man, I'm gonna take more of these so we can have more slideshows." I still was a musician for about a year, and I still am. Once you're a musician, you always are.
And he's still in a band that plays in Japan.
But I started taking photos of all of my friends in LA, so that and I'd spend the week going around everyone's house and take candid photos, and then we'd have a slideshow. And I would always try to, what I loved was when they said, "Oh, I didn't even know you took that picture." That's what I liked. And that taught me how to be like a documentary photographer. And then when some of my friends were famous, they became famous, like Mama Cass, the Mamas and Papas, and Neil Young, David Crosby, Stephen Stills, these were all fellow musicians of mine. And pretty soon they started saying, "Hey, we could use that on an album cover." And so I kind of just segued into being a photographer. Here's my first rock and roll picture. I went to the Buffalo Springfield. That's Neil Young and Stephen Stills in the Buffalo Springfield. And so when I went to the beach with them, I went down to the beach while they did their sound check. And when I walked back, I was photographing that mural because I wanted to show that in my slideshow. And they walked out the back door, and I said, "Wait a minute, just stand there, you guys, so I can see the size of that mural." And a week later, a magazine called me and said, "We hear you have a picture of the Buffalo Springfield. We'd like to run it, and we'll pay you $100. And I went, "Oh my God, are you kidding me? Somebody will pay me for doing my hobby." I couldn't believe it. So that was the first picture I got paid for.
Sweater Neil Young is wearing.
Yes, the sweater. This is the Love and Spoonful. The next group I photographed in '67, my old roommate became their producer. And he said, "Henry, you want to learn to be a photographer? Come to New York and spend the summer with the Love and Spoonful. We need a lot of photos. We'll pay for your film, your processing. We'll pay all the expenses, and you'll learn to be a photographer." And so I did, and I did learn. So I was hired by them, but they never would let me take a group shot without giving me the finger or doing something. And so this is typical of what they did. This is the back of one of their first albums. And then this is the Hollies. One day, Mama Cass called when I was with the Love and Spoonful and said, "I'm bringing some friends over to meet the Love and Spoonful," and it was the Hollies. And so Graham Nash in the middle said, "Oh, we need some photographs. How about tomorrow we take some?" And the revelation for me was, look at these guys posing like Vogue models. The Love and Spoonful had given me the finger, and these guys were like Vogue models. It was amazing. Here's the Monkees. I love this picture because I gave Peter Tork that book, Autobiography of a Yogi. It's an amazing spiritual book, and he's reading it there. So this is between shots, they're sitting there kind of bored. This is the Turtles. They were, quite a big hit group in the 60s, and we were driving around Wisconsin, and we saw these signs that said cheese with an arrow. And we just, we followed them, for about 20 minutes, and we came to the Bass Lake Cheese Factory. And we all bought it. They're eating cheese on sticks. It's not popsicles. And then we stopped, and we saw that sign, and we just had to stop and take that picture. So, in high school, I went with a girl whose father was a brigadier general. And he always, if you made a mistake, he would say, "That's PPP, poor prior planning." And when I saw that sign, I thought, oh, that's PPP right there. Here's Mama Cass, everybody's dear friend in Laurel Canyon. We call her the Gertrude Stein of Laurel Canyon because she introduced so many people. She introduced Graham Nash to Crosby and Stills to make the Crosby, Stills, Nash group. She introduced everybody all the time. And so this was for an album cover, but it was used for a billboard on Sunset Strip.
Wasn't that in the desert, though?
In the desert in Palm Springs, yeah. We went out there, we took a limo from LA in the middle of the night and got there at dawn. We started shooting, and by the time it was like 7 in the morning, it was already 100 degrees, and her makeup was running down her face. So we checked into a motel, the Gene Autry Motor Hotel, and waited till the end of the day, and we went out and then took this picture. So this is Mama Cass's house up in Laurel Canyon, and the mamas and papas would play these TV shows, and she would meet English rock and roll guys who had never been to America before, and so she met Eric Clapton.
That's Eric Clapton.
And he didn't know anybody. He was very shy. And she said, well, come over to my house tomorrow. We'll have a little barbecue. I'll invite some friends. So she invited David Crosby back there, passing me the joint, you can see. Of course I said no. But he brought his protege, Joni Mitchell. No one had ever heard of Joni Mitchell before. And she sat there and played her entire first album. And Eric was just, mesmerized. And that's Mama Cass's little daughter, Owen, there, chewing on a film can. That was back when Kodak had little silver and yellow film cans. But anyway, John Sebastian from the Lovin' Spoonful moved to LA, lived on a sort of a commune where there was a lady named Tie-Dye Annie. And she taught him how to tie-dye, and he tie-dyed every piece of clothing he owned. And so there he is with his clothes.
He lived in a tie-dye tent.
Tie-dyed tent. There should be a picture
And
of
the
it.
cover of Henry's book
Yes.
is made from a piece of tie-dye.
right.
I went to John's house, because this was a
Right.
place that we all hung out. And I went to John's house in Woodstock and asked him for an original piece of tie-dye. I carried it to England.
Maybe it's on
We
the-
duplicated it for the cover of Henry's book, because this was
He
a place
tie-dyed that, yeah.
we all
It's
hung
amazing.
out and did strange things.
Yeah,
So.
wow. There's James Taylor. So this day I got a call. A lot of pictures start with a phone call in my kitchen. And Peter Asher, his manager, said, would you come over to my house and photograph this young guy who just came from England? And so there was James Taylor, and I walked in and he was playing Oh Susanna, finger picking. It was so amazing, and I just got down on my knees and took these photos. And I said, we need to go outside where there's some light, and over there is a black and white picture of Sweet Baby James. That was the day I took the cover of Sweet Baby James, one of my favorite albums.
And Peter Asher was in Peter and Gordon before he became James's manager.
Right. Richard Pryor. So
You have to tell the whole story.
his manager called me, and I had a partner, and he was a graphic artist. We did album covers. And the manager called and said, go to Richard's house and take a picture for the cover. And that was it. So we go to the house, knock on the door in the morning. His wife says, you go try to get him out of bed. He won't get out of bed. So we go back, and we're in the bedroom looking down at Richard Pryor. He's on a pillow. He says, just take the picture right here, and this will be the cover, me in bed, We said, no, come on, Richard, we got to do something, And so he sits up, and he says, well, if I do anything, I want it to be rootsy. This was before the book Roots, or the movie Roots. But so my friend Gary said, well, I know a guy who has some Aborigine jewelry and stuff and weapons, and he went and got it. And we went up into Beverly Hills, where there was a little cave. We took this picture. So this looks so much like National Geographic to me that we got an artist to draw a little border, like a yellow border, like National Geographic. And it came out, and we got 2 letters, one from the National Geographic lawyers threatening to sue us for defaming their famous logo. And the second letter was from the Grammys nominating us for Album Cover of the Year. Jackson Browne, one of my favorite songwriters. This was, we borrowed this old Chevy to take a picture for his Late for the Sky album. It wasn't used on that, but he had to, so we borrowed, so Glenn Fry from the Eagles had given Jackson this car, and Jackson had given it to a girlfriend, and we had to borrow it back from the girlfriend, and she's in the back seat there. You can see her toes sticking up. She's waiting for us to finish with the car. Here's Neil Young, who liked to buy old, this is sort of a car series here. He liked it, this was an old Woody station wagon that he bought. Transportation, not cars. Jimmy Webb, who wrote MacArthur Park and a bunch of, Wichita linemen, and by the time I get to Phoenix. Anyway, he loved to glide in gliders, and so we went up in the mountains and took this picture for his album cover. We went back a few weeks later to do some filming, and we crashed in those mountains there. We got sucked down into a downdraft, and there was nowhere to land. It was all mountains and pine trees. But his instructor said, if you ever have to crash in the trees, fly between two trees equally so you take both wings off at the same time so you don't spin around. And that's what he did. He flew right into the trees, took both wings out. We were both unconscious for a little bit, and then a helicopter rescued us. Anyway, it was
I was doing an interview. I'm
telling it quickly, yeah.
with Jimmy Webb for the book, and Henry said, "Oh, I almost died in a plane crash with him." And I thought, "Oh, something Henry's saying." And when I sat down with Jimmy to do the interview, he went blow by blow through the gliders, plane crash, and the rescue. So that is a true
We woke
story.
up with the tail up in a tree and the nose on the ground, and I was in the front with a camera, and he was behind me, was quiet. Then he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And first of all, we were unconscious. I woke up with blood. I could see blood dripping down. We got cuts, just cuts from the plastic canopy. He said, "That's what it feels like to die." Wow. And then the next thing he said was, "Have you got a joint?" And I did, That was quite a day, There's the governor, Schwarzenegger. Arnold, yeah, I worked for a German magazine, and the correspondent was good friends with him. This was for a magazine story out in Malibu.
What year was that?
I don't really remember the year, 70s probably. I just remember he smoked cigars and, bigger than life, great guy. That's the Mamas and Papas. It was the back of one of their album covers. This is the Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young, Taylor, and Reeves. And there's Crosby having a little toke back there. His favorite thing. Oops, wait a minute, back. Uh-oh, God's sakes. Oh, in the 60s, every musician I knew smoked grass. I call it God's herb. It's not a big deal, It's like a glass of wine, really, but all musicians smoke grass, and so just thought I'd throw that in. This is Mama Cass's little girl on her 3rd birthday. Oh, and this is a little baby series. I like that picture. That's Amy. That's my graphic artist partner's daughter, Amy. Here's Chris Christopherson with his 2 daughters, Tracy and Casey. This was up in Colorado at a recording ranch, Caribou Recording Ranch. Here's Joni Mitchell up in Laurel Canyon playing the dulcimer, and that is Gary's daughter, Amy, again. Here's Paul McCartney and Linda, and that's their daughter, Mary, out in Malibu in '71. Paul, I was good friends with Linda. We became good friends. So the first day I met Paul was this day, and I go knock on the door. The housekeeper says, "Go wait in the patio, they'll be down." I walked out the back door, and then I hear this, Henry. And I look up, and there's Paul McCartney leaning over the balcony. The first moment I met him, he said,
Were you cool?
He said, "Have you got anything to smoke?" I'm telling you, that's it.
Were you in awe that you were with Paul?
No.
See?
These people are fellow musicians, once you're a musician, it's kind of a fraternity, There's Mama Cass and her little daughter Owen again, the baby chewing on the film can. And this is David Crosby and his son Django. Yeah, a little bit older there, yeah. I have
Well,
lots of younger.
I'll tell you when this is, because Django is a year older than my kids, and Django was about 8, so this is 12 years ago, something like that.
About that, I guess, yeah. There's Joni Mitchell in her house in Laurel Canyon. It's the very, very, very fine house that Graham Nash wrote about. Yeah. Michael Jackson. The Rolling Stone called me one day and wanted me to go down to Motown Records to photograph Michael for a cover of Rolling Stone, and I'd photographed him before. You know, he was very quiet but very nice. You know, he very cooperative, very, you know. And so I took pictures, and there was one like that on the cover of Rolling Stone. This is Linda Ronstadt when she was maybe 19 or 20 in the Stone Ponies. She was barefoot. She sang on stage barefoot, a real little country girl. Oops. Neil Young.
Fashion forward Neil Young.
Yeah, this was, we were taking pictures for the cover of his album Harvest. I don't know how many of you are Neil Young fans, but these were going to be photos we might use on the cover of Harvest, but my partner Gary got into an argument with him, and so that kind of blew the whole deal, and Neil put the record out with just the name Harvest on it, and no pictures. This is Neil Diamond.
Isn't that fantastic?
And that is the TWA airport at JFK. We were talking about that at dinner, right? And that's the same airport. He was just sitting there waiting for a flight. Stephen Stills, so this was his first album cover. It snowed. This was the night Jimi Hendrix died. We were at a cabin in Colorado, and he heard on the phone Jimi Hendrix died. So we stayed up all night, and in the morning there was snow all over the place, and Stephen said, "Grab your camera," and he said, we ran outside, and he started sitting there, and I was going to take pictures, and he said, "Wait a minute." He ran back in the house and came out with this pink giraffe and set it down, you know. And I took a few shots, and I said, "Okay, Stephen, we're through with that giraffe," you know. He said, "No, I want the giraffe in the pictures." So, you know, I didn't know why. I hated it, you know. But that became one of his album covers. And now I kind of like it, because without it, it's just a guy with a guitar, you know. Here, this is On the Road with David Cassidy. I got hired by Teeny Bopper magazines, hired me to shoot the Monkees in the 60s, and then the Partridge Family in the early 70s, and I became friends with David and went around the world with him. So we were in Melbourne, Australia, and Gina Lollobrigida was there in the same hotel, and so they became friends, yeah.
It's quite an outfit he's
So this is kind of a funny story. So I used to take pictures of the Eagles, and Glenn Fry and Don Henley would be watching sports on TV, and they'd be seeing a UCLA game, and they had a funny joke. They'd say, "Call Irving," their manager, Irving Azoff, "Call Irving and have him send a limo for the cheerleaders," you know. It was a macho joke, you know. So I told that to David, and then a little while later, a German magazine said, "We'd like to do a home story with David. Would you ask him if he has any ideas?" And he said, "Sure, tell him to send a limo for the UCLA cheerleaders." And we did, they did, you know. And the German magazine called UCLA, and they said, "Sure, we'll send the cheerleaders up." And they brought these outfits and all, you know, and that was totally unexpected. And then David became really good friends with the girl on the far right there. Her name was Delight de Bruyne. It was a Dutch name, isn't it? You guys from Holland over there? The Netherlands, I mean.
But didn't you, in the past few years, meet Delight de Bruyne's?
No, but we have this picture up in we have a gallery called Morrison Hotel Gallery, and this was hanging on the wall in New York one day. I wasn't there, but they said, and a guy came in and said, "Hey, that's my wife." The girl. He didn't know the whole story. Here's Keith and Ronnie from the Rolling Stones, Ron Wood and Keith Richards, doing their Mick Jagger imitation in a Learjet. There's another black and white over there, the two of them in this Learjet. Um, Ringo Starr. I became friends with Ringo, and Paul, and this was after the Beatles. But one day I got a call to come to a rehearsal to photograph Ringo and his band, and I said, now Ringo, I need to get up on the stage. It was just a rehearsal to photograph the drummer and all that, I said, do you mind if I'm up there while you're rehearsing? He said, look, I'm the drummer, you're the photographer. It's as simple as that. And so that was always the thing with Ringo, just the simpler, the better. This was at the Bangladesh concert at Madison Square Garden. It was George Harrison and Bob Dylan. I didn't have a photo pass, but the lighting director, Chip Monk, gave me a crew pass, and I brought my cameras and hid them in the afternoon.
Chip was a guy that did all the lighting at Woodstock.
At Woodstock, and I was one of his crew members. I was disguised as a crew member.
So tell that whole story, Henry, because
well, that was it. I hid my cameras under his lighting board, and the manager was kicking all the photographers out, and I just waited until this moment and pulled them out and took the picture from the edge of the stage. Let's see, Richard Pryor again. This was in my friend's garage, and we had that flag up from some photos a week before, and the watermelon was actually for lunch, and he picked it up and started doing all this, shtick. He was like Robin Williams, he never stopped, Jackson Browne, one of my favorite songwriters. This is Richard Harris, and he did some Jimmy Webb, MacArthur Park he recorded. And so we went out to a movie set. They were doing the Molly Maguire's, a coal mining movie in Pennsylvania. Jimmy Webb, who wrote, later he wrote that song, The Highwaymen, that group, The Highwaymen, with Willie Nelson and all those people recorded. Here he is looking like a highwayman. Sort of. Yeah. Years before. This is 65. No, wait, 67. Yeah. Jim Morrison at the Hollywood Bowl. A lot of people, everybody, most question, the people always ask me is, what was he really like, And the fact is, he was a very quiet guy. A lot of these guys are quiet. Jimi Hendrix, very quiet, very kind of shy. Not shy, but like a little boy, very simple. Eric Clapton, totally shy. Jim Morrison wasn't shy, but he was quiet. He was a poet. He liked to observe, and he wasn't demonstrative. He was kind of an internal guy. Oh boy, these things. That's Joni Mitchell again in her house in Laurel Canyon. There's Paul and Linda. I took these pictures one afternoon at their house in Malibu, and then Linda said, we want to see these photos first thing in the morning because we want to use one for the cover of Life magazine, which was kind of the holy grail for photographers in those days. So I brought them back, and they picked out this one picture for the cover of Life. It was on the cover of Life in black and white. So this was in the days before FedEx, and certainly in the days before scanning and emailing. So they had the lady from Life magazine waiting in the living room. They looked through the pictures in the bedroom, handed her the one slide. She took it, put it in her purse, went to the airport, and flew to New York with it. That was the quickest way, to get it there.
But they couldn't print it in color. It was too short.
There wasn't time to print it in color, yeah.
But this is a fantastic image.
Yeah, this is the group America. We rode out into the desert on horseback and went to an oasis on an Indian reservation. And my partner, Gary, wanted that mirror because he wanted to lay it on the ground, and they would look in the mirror, and it would look like a hole in the ground. I would photograph them looking in. And so the night before, they walked up on the top of the hillside to see some bats flying around. And Gary said, bring that mirror with you. And as they walked along, they were way, way up. I don't know, way up in the air. And I said, I could see something bouncing in the mirror. I said, wait a minute, stand still. And they stood still, and it was the moon coming up behind us and the sun setting on the far side. And that was on one of their albums, actually the back of one album. This is Kurt Cobain at one of the last concert in LA before he killed himself. And my little daughter Zoe was like 13. She wanted to see Nirvana. So I knew I got some tickets from the manager, and they gave me a photo pass. We're sitting way in the back, and her mom said, "Now, don't you let her out of your sight for a moment, you know." And so I'm looking through binoculars, and I see my friends down in the front photographing, and I think, I'm an idiot. I should be down there. I said, "Zoe, honey, don't move, you know, sit right here." Yeah. And I went down, and I could shoot one song by the time I got there, and I got that one magic photo. It was, it should have been much more blurry. I don't know, it was just a gift, you know, that photo. Here's Crosby, Stills, Nash on the, from their first album cover. And you know, we took this picture before they had named themselves. And so that's Nash, Stills, and Crosby, not Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And so after we took the picture, we had a slideshow, and they said, well, that would be a good photo for a cover, except we've changed, now we're going to be called Crosby, Stills, Nash. So I said, no problem, we'll just go back to the house. It'll take 5 minutes. You jump on the couch. So we all got in the car and went back, and the house was gone. So that was the cover in the wrong order.
And the rest is history.
Yes, yes. So this is the Morrison Hotel. The Doors called us up and said, we'd like you to do our cover. And we went over to their office, and we said, well, do you have a title for your album? No, we don't. We said, well, do you have some idea of what you want? No, we don't, you know. And so then Ray Manzarek, the guy in the bottom there, said, he just, you know, randomly said, you know, my wife Dorothy and I were driving through LA the other day, downtown LA, and we saw this old hotel. It said Morrison Hotel. We said, well, that sounds great. Let's go. We went down and found it, looked at it, and came back a week later with the group. So we walk in. It's a derelict hotel for winos, transients, you know. It says rooms, $2.50, you know. And so we walk in, and there's no one in the lobby. It's old crummy furniture and one young guy behind the desk. And I said, well, we're just going to be over there taking a few pictures, you know. And he said, no, you can't, you know. I said, why not? What's the problem? You know, he said, no, you can't. You have to get the owner's permission. And he was out of town. And I said, okay, you guys, come on out. We got to go. We can't do it. I figured I'd have them stand in front of the window, and they couldn't stop us then. So we went out in front of the window, and I saw that light go on up there, that light under the sun, Morrison. And I looked through, I said, hey, the guy left the desk. That's the elevator light. He just got in the elevator. I said, quick, run in there. And they ran in, and we took that picture, 5 minutes. And then that was the cover.
And that's why he's the photographer.
And then Jim said, let's go get a drink. And so, yeah, okay, so we went down to Skid Row a few blocks away, and it was all bars and pawn shops. Well, we didn't know where to stop because they were all bars. And then on the corner, coming up, we were in a Volkswagen van. Through the windshield, we saw Hard Rock Cafe. Wow, no one had ever heard that name before, but that sounded great. So we stopped and went in and had some beers. And then they put this on the back of the Morrison Hotel cover. And a week after the album came out, they got a call from London, and a voice said, would you mind if we use that name? We're starting a cafe here in London, and we'd like to call it the Hard Rock Cafe. And they said, no, go right ahead. That was the beginning of the Hard Rock Cafes, yeah. And so we went inside, and we bought beers for some of the local guys. And, yeah. And Jim loved, you know, he was a poet, you know, and he loved to hear them talking about their lives. You know, I ran away, I joined the Merchant Marines, I saw the world. He loved hearing all that. And so here we are outside with his new best friends, right? They thought, what a nice guy, you know. He wants to hear us talk about our lives, you know. They didn't know, nobody knew who he was. They weren't even that famous then. So we're ending up with Woodstock here. This is, there's John Sebastian again with his tie-dyes. Right?
Now, John spoke. John was brought in to sing because he had an acoustic guitar at the time.
No, wait. John was not on the bill. He happened to live in the town of Woodstock, and he took acid that day and thought, well, I'll go to this festival on acid. It'll be a real trip. And he wandered out, you know, on stage, and they couldn't, the next act hadn't arrived yet. They had to come in by helicopter because all the roads were closed. and somebody shoved a guitar in his hand and said, "Quick, go out there, sing some songs," you know. He went out there high on acid and did the best show of ever in his life. He talked to that crowd like it was his best friend, you know, like it was just this one guy or something. It was really quite amazing.
But
it's in the movie.
He thinks, if you hear him tell
Yeah.
it now, he considers it one of his worst
Oh
performances,
no, it was
which
just,
everyone loves.
It was wonderful. It was amazing. Yeah. And here's this is people say, what was your favorite moment of Woodstock? And I say, you know, it was Monday morning. Jimi Hendrix was supposed to go on Sunday night, but it was so backed up, he went on Monday morning. And when he played the Star-Spangled Banner, it was, you know, chilling. It was mesmerizing. First of all, we were all hippies. We were against the war, against the draft, against the government. And here he is playing. At first you think, wait a minute, that's a patriotic, no, that's their song. And then you think, wait a minute, no, that's our song, you know. It was, you know, there was a moment
And he
there,
had been
you
in
know?
the Air Force. Jimi Hendrix
Yeah.
had been in the Air Force before
But
this.
you know, the big thing about Woodstock is that, you know, we were all hippies, and we came from all over the country where, you know, you would go to the park and there'd be a few hundred hippies, but to see 400,000 hippies, it was like the Sioux, you know, General Custer, when all the Sioux Nation was together. Wow, there's so many of us, you know, that was the whole thing about it.